In this world, many children with sociopathic tendencies and criminal records have been sent to prison. Yes, the people you will meet have exchanged their toys, crayons, and school dramas for handcuffs and a hideous orange jumpsuit. How did they end up in prison? Let's investigate the causes while presenting the most dangerous young individuals who are currently rotting in prison. The name Aaron Caffey will forever be linked to a horrific tragedy that shook the entire world. Born on July 26, 1991 in Texas, Aaron seemed to lead a normal life in a small town, raised in Alba, Texas, by his parents Penny and Terry Caffey, along with his two younger brothers Matthew and Tyler. At first glance, the family appeared normal, but sinister forces were at work behind this facade. At just 16 years old, Aaron Caffey embarked on a journey that would permanently affect his life and the lives of those around him. Aaron devised a heinous plan to escape the strict rules of his parents, fueled by his passion for Charlie Wilkinson and a desperate desire to avoid his parents' stringent laws. Aaron, Charlie, and two accomplices, Charles Wade and Bobby Johnson, broke into the Caffey home armed with firearms in the early hours of March 1, 2008. Their objectives were disturbing, to say the least. They cruelly attacked Aaron's family while they slept. The savage attack took the lives of Aaron's mother, Penny, and his two younger brothers, Matthew and Tyler. The sound of gunfire pierced the stillness, forever marking that terrible night. Despite several gunshot wounds, Aaron's father, Terry, survived the attack. Aaron, once an innocent daughter and sister, became a willing participant in an unimaginable act of violence. Aaron Caffey and her accomplices fled the scene after the horrific act, but their attempts to evade legal responsibility were short-lived. Soon the gang was captured by the police and taken to face the repercussions of their crimes. Aaron was tried as an adult despite her age due to the severity of the offense. She pleaded guilty in court to 3 counts of capital murder, and the gravity of her guilt became clear when the details of the crime were revealed. Ultimately, the judge imposed a sentence commensurate with the severity of the offense. Aaron Caffey received 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, in addition to an additional 25-year sentence for her role in the attempted murder of her father, Terry. The case of Aaron Caffey continues to attract public attention, leading many to wonder what motivated such a heinous crime, to what extent her lover Charlie Wilkinson influenced her, and what psychological factors may have led to her willingness to take the lives of her own family. Aaron is still incarcerated, locked away in a prison cell, and her life has been permanently altered by the decisions she made. Antonio Barbeau was one of 2 teenagers accused of a horrific crime that took the life of an elderly woman in September 2012. The shocking circumstances of the crime shook the small village of Sheboygan Falls. Barbeau brutally took the life of his great-grandmother, Barbara Olson, 28, in her own home using a hammer and an axe. Barbeau made a surprising decision that sent shockwaves through the court. He pleaded not guilty to first-degree intentional homicide. After months of court hearings and investigations, this meant that he accepted the conviction without admitting guilt, changing his plea from not guilty by reason of mental illness to guilty by reason of mental illness. This unexpected turn was part of a plea agreement that would have long-term consequences for him. Barbeau struggled to show remorse during the sentencing hearing. Standing before the judge and trying to address the court, the weight of his actions bore down on him. His emotions were clearly suppressed, but eventually overwhelmed him, causing him to stumble and falter. Recognizing the gravity of his client's situation, Barbeau's defense attorney intervened and read the remainder of the statement on his behalf. "I acknowledge that I have difficulty expressing my emotions. I'm not sure why, but that doesn't mean I don't feel sorry. I took someone's mother, grandmother, sister, or friend without having the authority to do so. I ruined the lives of so many people because of a decision I made." Barbeau cried as the attorney read his statement, overwhelmed by his punishment, resting his head on the table, expressing his anguish as he realized how much he had ruined his own life and that of others. After the trial, Barbeau's difficult past was revealed by a doctor who discovered that cognitive deficits caused by a traumatic incident when he was only 10 years old may have impacted his behavior. Barbeau's life was forever altered when he was hit by a car at a young age, affecting his destiny and shaping his subsequent decisions. The verdict was solemnly delivered by the judge. Antonio Barbeau was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 36 years. The seriousness of the punishment hung heavy in the air as the weight of those words fell upon the court. Although Barbeau glimpsed a hope for freedom, it was a distant prospect to be realized only in 2048. Sierra Halseth's career began as an exemplary student with a promising future, but took a dark turn when she became involved in a horrific act that shocked the city. Sierra Halseth was born in 2001 in Las Vegas, Nevada, into a loving and prosperous family. She excelled academically and displayed great skills in various extracurricular activities. Halseth quickly gained popularity among her peers and was seen as a role model due to her intelligence and charisma. She was interested in community service and had a bright future ahead of her. However, Halseth's life took a drastic turn in May 2021 when news of her involvement in a heinous crime leaked. Halseth was accused of taking her own father's life with the help of her boyfriend, Aaron Guerrero, at the age of 16. The motivation for the crime was initially unknown, but as the investigation progressed, a dark picture emerged. Reports indicated that Halseth and Guerrero methodically planned the crime to cover their tracks and make it seem natural. They allegedly used tools and equipment to commit the act, leaving a horrific scene in their wake. The terrible nature of the crime sent shockwaves through the city, leaving friends, relatives, and neighbors bewildered and in mourning. Sierra Halseth and Aaron Guerrero were captured and charged in October 2021. Surveillance footage, text messages, and witness testimonies were among the overwhelming evidence presented against them. The subsequent trial exposed a chilling web of deception, manipulation, and malevolent intentions. Both defendants were characterized as heartless individuals who plotted to take a life for their own benefit. Sierra Halseth eventually pleaded guilty to the charges against her, accepting a plea deal that spared her from a life sentence without the possibility of parole. In January 2022, she was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, with the possibility of release after serving a minimum of 10 years. Her age, lack of a prior criminal record, and the plea agreement she accepted were factors considered in her sentencing. The public reaction to Halseth's punishment varied. Some believed that the sentence was too lenient given the horrific nature of the act, while others thought that her age and potential for recovery justified a second chance. Sierra Halseth is currently incarcerated, serving her sentence and dealing with the repercussions of her decisions. The name James Fairweather has become synonymous with horrific atrocities that shocked the neighborhood and sent shockwaves throughout the country. Fairweather was born on May 17, 1998 in Colchester, Essex, and his upbringing gave little hint of the terrible trajectory he would follow. Fairweather's origins were quite ordinary, growing up in a middle-class home with no obvious indicators of difficulties or aggressive tendencies. However, as he approached adolescence, a terrible metamorphosis occurred within him. Fairweather began to show signs of mental instability, including an obsession with sacrifice and violence. He distanced himself from social activities, exhibiting more unpredictable behavior that alarmed his peers and family members. Fairweather's disordered mind spiraled out of control in 2014, leading him to commit a series of heinous atrocities that would permanently stain his name. He initiated a terrible wave of crimes when he was just 15 years old, sending shockwaves throughout the city of Colchester. His victims, James Atfield and Nahid Al-Manea, were brutally assaulted and stabbed in separate incidents, leaving the neighborhood in terror. Fairweather's actions were carried out with chilling premeditation and brutality. He meticulously planned his attacks, targeting vulnerable individuals in remote areas, emphasizing the deliberate nature of his activities. Fairweather's operation consisted of stalking, overpowering, and brutally taking the lives of his victims. The ferocity and senselessness of his acts sent shockwaves not only across Britain, but also to Saudi Arabia, triggering a massive manhunt. James Fairweather was captured following a thorough investigation, and the extent of his disturbing acts was revealed during his trial. The court heard horrifying details about his obsession with serial killers, his fixation on sacrifices, and his desire to replicate the horrific crimes of those he idolized. The evidence against him was overwhelming, leaving no doubt about his guilt. Fairweather faced the repercussions of his horrific acts when he was sentenced to life imprisonment in 2016. Given the severity of the crimes and the irreparable suffering caused to the victims' families, the judge concluded that Fairweather should serve a minimum of 27 years before being eligible for parole. The punishment was designed to ensure he faced the full weight of his conduct and would not inflict further harm on society. Fairweather's imprisonment served as a reminder of the devastation that violent acts can inflict on individuals and communities worldwide. At the young age of 15, a boy named Nehemiah Griego committed an unthinkable act that forever shattered the foundation of his family in a horrendous crime that occurred in October 2015. He took the lives of his parents and 3 younger siblings, subjecting them to a brutal attack with 2 different weapons. The magnitude of his actions sent shockwaves throughout the neighborhood, leaving everyone stunned. Recognizing the gravity of his acts, Nehemiah boldly confessed to his participation in the tragic event. Initially, a family judge requested a sentence commensurate with his age, citing his youth at the time of the offense. However, this earlier decision was overturned in 2019, and Nehemiah was sentenced as an adult. During his time in prison, he chose to cooperate with the police without the presence of a lawyer. In his honest confession, Nehemiah stated that his actions were motivated by a strong hatred for his mother. The severity of the act, along with the existence of multiple victims, warranted a sentence of up to 120 years in prison. Ultimately, Nehemiah was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences, with credit for the 6 years and 2,085 days he had already served. This meant he would have to serve at least 30 years in prison before being eligible for parole. Nehemiah remained silent while the sentence was read in an emotionally charged courtroom, masking his deep sadness. However, he paused to express remorse and apologize to his family. According to reports from the proceedings, Nehemiah spoke softly and genuinely, deeply moved. This representation contributed to the complexities of the tragedy, raising questions about society's understanding of the fundamental reasons behind such horrific crimes. He apologized for taking the lives of his parents and siblings, saying, "I wish I could turn back time, but the reality is that I can't." The depths of Nehemiah's anguish and the psychological factors that led him to commit such a horrific act are impossible to comprehend. Nevertheless, his apologies hinted at his regret for the irreparable damage he caused. His sister described Nehemiah as a difficult young man to raise and emphasized the importance of keeping him imprisoned, stating that 5 years was not enough time for him to improve. Nehemiah's story is a poignant reminder of how unpredictable human behavior can be. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as Roxana Sikorski's fate hung in the balance. It was a day of reckoning for the young woman who had planned, along with her adult lover, to commit a horrific crime against her own family. The circumstances leading to this crucial moment began in October 2014, when Roxana, then 15 years old, woke up in the middle of the night with a terrifying thought. She had attempted to take the life of her younger brother, consumed by a distorted desire to harm her parents and siblings. Fortunately, her plan was thwarted and her family survived. Roxana's mother, Laureen Sikorski, found the courage to address the court before the judge began reading the sentence. She made an emotional appeal for sympathy on behalf of her adopted daughter, expressing her conflicting emotions. Laureen emphasized that Roxana needed ongoing psychological help, arguing that sentencing her as an adult and exposing her to the harsh realities of prison would only destroy her already fragile world. Roxana's adoptive father, Jeffrey, echoed Laureen's concerns, expressing fear for his daughter's safety in an adult penitentiary. He presented her as a fragile child ensnared in a web of evil. The court debated the complexities of the case, delving into Roxana's tragic past. She had been diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder as a child, a mental illness that inhibits the ability to form emotional bonds with primary caregivers. This revelation offered additional insight into the atrocities that occurred. Roxana showed true remorse in court, apologizing to her parents for not being the daughter they expected. The gravity of her actions had finally dawned on her, and she was fully aware of the consequences. Meanwhile, Roxana's adult accomplice, who supported and enabled the conspiracy to take the lives of her entire family, had already received a life sentence after being found guilty on all 7 counts. Although Roxana was clearly involved in the crime, her age and troubled past compelled the court to consider possibilities for rehabilitation and atonement. As a result, Roxana was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison, a significant portion of her young life. The court decided that she had committed a horrific act and must face the consequences. This sentence also served as a deterrent, sending a message to other young people who might consider breaking the law or harming others.